Hey everybody, welcome back to Tech Progress. My name is Corey, and today I've got a special unboxing and review for you. We're going to be taking a look at the Sega Genesis Mini, but first, I'd like to show you this. This is my original Sega Genesis from 1992. I did just plug it in, and it does still work. It might need a little bit of cleaning, but it is still in working condition. Picture a 7-year-old version of myself opening this up on Christmas morning in 1992. The system had already been out for a couple of years, and in fact, my first game for it was none other than Sonic 2, which came out in 1992. And it was actually a brand new game at the time when I got it at Christmas. So I spent hours upon hours upon hours with the Genesis and Sonic 2 until I got some more games. But because this was such a big part of my childhood, when they announced that the Sega Genesis Mini was coming out, I couldn't help but pre-order it right away. I was excited to get this. I never did buy any of the other knockoff ones, but when they said the official Sega one was coming out, I thought, I gotta jump on this. It comes with 2 controllers, the system, as well as 42 games, 40 games plus Tetris and Darius that never actually came out for the original console, I believe. So I thought maybe I could unbox it live, play around with it a little bit, show you guys some features, and let you know what I think of it, see how it compares to the original. So let's start off, let's open it up. Nothing to cut open. All right. Looks like we got a little USB adapter. Take that out of the plastic. Oh, brand new Sega Genesis controller. Not the shiny plastic that I remember, either that or my plastic was just really worn away. But yeah, there's the new controller. We'll see how that compares to the older ones in a bit. So it comes with not one, but 2 of those. They are USB, not a serial port like the old ones. So they are a USB controller. Let's see what else it comes with. The Sega Genesis Mini book. A USB type USB-B mini or USB-A to USB micro cable for power. An HDMI cable. And the Genesis Mini itself. Alright, let's take a look at this. First of all, I do want to say the packaging is extremely reminiscent of the original console, which is really cool. I had the core system that didn't come with any games, but I do remember what the console box looked like. So this is it. Wow, this is looking so cool. Alright, so we got a little sticker we can peel off here. We'll pull that off. And there it is. The Sega Genesis Mini. Alright, let's take a look at this and see what we got. So first of all, the on-off switch is the same as the original. It has a volume slider. Unfortunately, no headphone jack. That would have been really cool. But the original one had a headphone jack right on it for separate audio that you could run right through your headphones. I'll show you that in a minute. Let's see. It has the original on-off switch. Reset button that actually seems like it works. A cartridge port that you can actually put a cartridge into. Well, you can't actually put a cartridge into it, but it actually opens up, which is cool. Has the HDMI out and the USB power in. 2 USB ports in the front for plugging in the controllers in the original spot where the old controllers were. And I really want to see if this works. It does. The original expansion slot for the Sega CD actually has a dust cover that comes off just like the original did. That's really cool. I'm thoroughly impressed so far by the looks of this thing. Oh boy. All right. So there it is. There's the original Sega Genesis Mini, and just for comparison, let's bring out the original Sega Genesis here and do a side-by-side of what these things look like. So there's the original, and there's the Mini. See, cartridge slot, original on-off switch. Here's the headphone jack on the original one and the volume slider. Which this has the volume slider that works, which is really cool, but it doesn't have the headphone jack. But anyway, let's get this hooked up and play some games and see how it plays. Those games brought back a lot of good memories from a long time ago. So let's take a look at the hardware so you can see what you're getting into when you purchase one of these. So when you turn on the Sega Genesis Mini, you are greeted with the game selection screen. This is where you're going to find all 42 included games tiled across the screen, displaying their original box art. The screen can be sorted alphabetically, by release date, by genre, or by number of players. You can also toggle a spine view by pressing the B button to give the entire library a bookshelf look, and also to display all 42 games on screen at the same time without having to scroll through the pages up or down. Heading into the settings menu, you are first greeted with a safety warning. Next, you have your language selection, which does a lot more than just change the language of the menu. It actually changes the entire menu, box art, and version of the game to match the region of the language you selected. Next, you have your screen settings, where you can choose between a 4:3 original or a 16:9 stretched aspect ratio. You also have the ability to add a CRT filter to make the screen look a little more nostalgic if you're like me and were used to playing the original Sega Genesis on an old CRT TV. I turned this feature on for a while, but ended up turning it off in the end. Although it adds a nice feeling of nostalgia, the picture just looks way better in HD without the filter, in my opinion. Next, you'll find your wallpaper settings, which changes the background that is displayed around the game screen in 4:3 cropped mode. There are 2 wallpapers to choose from, and an option to just use black bars instead. The next 3 options are just the staff credits, legal notices, and a factory reset option, all of which are pretty well self-explanatory. One thing that I noticed while navigating the menu is that the directional pad is extremely sensitive. One press might move your highlighted option 2 or 3 spaces instead of 1. I found this to be very annoying when trying to navigate the menu or game selections. But this problem seems to be only within the user interface of the Sega Genesis Mini and doesn't affect gameplay at all. Speaking of gameplay, the Sega Genesis Mini's emulation, which was completed by the well-known developer M2, is excellent in my opinion. I found that the games seemed to run exactly as they did on my original Genesis, right down to the Chaos Emerald blinking, which is not a glitch. In fact, I compared the two many times throughout my testing. One thing I did find is that in some places where the frame rate dipped on the original Genesis, it also dipped in the Genesis Mini. So here's an example from Chemical Plant Zone 2 in Sonic 2. When you go underwater in this part of the level and have Tails with you, on the original Genesis, the frame rate slows down so much that it makes jumping almost impossible. And this can be repeated almost every time you play this level on the original Genesis. When I first played this level on the Genesis Mini, I was really curious to see if this problem was rectified, and at first I thought it was completely gone. But then it happened to me on the Genesis Mini as well. But the good news is that when testing this part of the level over and over again, thanks to the addition of save states, I was only able to repeat the frame rate slowdown a handful of times. And when it did slow down, it wasn't nearly as bad as on the original Genesis. So I don't know if it's just a processing power issue or a bug in the game's code that was carried over to the Genesis Mini, but it doesn't seem to be nearly as bad as it was in the original Genesis. I've been playing the Genesis Mini a lot this past week, and I haven't really seen many other emulation glitches. I would say the emulation is pretty solid. Moving on, the Genesis Mini allows you to save your progress at any point in the game and allows up to 4 save slots for each of the 42 games, which is something I really wish we had back in 1992. So back then you had 2 choices if you couldn't finish a game in one sitting. The first choice was to leave the console on if you were allowed to do so, and pick up the game later on and hope it doesn't crash. Second option was shut the console off and start over from the beginning again the next time you sit down to play. This added a lot of great replay value to many games. And then if you happen to die towards the end of a game, guess what? You got to start all over again. One feature that the system is lacking that is popular in most emulators today is a rewind feature. This feature was present on the Genesis Classics collection for Nintendo Switch, but it didn't make its way to the Genesis Mini, which is kinda disappointing, but the feature pretty well takes all the challenge out of the game anyway. The sound is pretty good in my opinion. I had no trouble feeling nostalgic hearing the Sega at the beginning of Sonic 2. Here's a couple of sound clips, one recorded on the Genesis Mini and the other recorded from the AV cables of the original Genesis to compare. Sorry about the picture quality, but for some reason the Genesis does not play well with an analog capture card. I have no idea why. It works with the Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Nintendo 64. Somehow it does not capture the Genesis. It's something to do with the scan line, the scan rate changing often. Is what I read, that new capture cards can't keep up with. But the purpose of this comparison is audio, and the audio was crisp and clear, and there was no issues with that. So as far as I'm concerned, I think the audio is great. At first I thought the input lag on the Genesis Mini was great, but when comparing the original Genesis to the Genesis Mini, I was jumping back and forth between playing a game on the original Genesis on a CRT TV, and then jumping into the same game on the Genesis Mini on an IPS monitor, and that's when I realized that the input lag definitely exists. I don't have a way to properly test the input lag, and I'm sure somebody else will cover that in a different video. So all I can tell you is that by feel alone, the input lag is there, but the games are still really playable. Even a game like Sonic is responsive enough to give you an enjoyable experience. The game library is amazing. There are so many great games in here that I used to play as a kid. This is where the Genesis really shines over some of the other official mini consoles. Most of these games were loved by a lot of people, and although there are some games that aren't included that I wish were, I feel that this is the best library of titles out of all the miniature consoles yet. Let me know in the comments what you think of the Genesis Mini's library, and let me know what games you wish were included with it. The last thing I want to talk about is Sega's attention to detail. Sega truly honored the legacy of the Genesis with this system. The controller feels great in your hand, the buttons feel a little more stiff than the original controllers that I have, but that could be due to years of wear and tear. Sega did everything right modeling this thing. The game cartridge slot has flaps that open, the volume slider moves, the reset button functions to bring up the in-game save menu, and the Sega CD expansion port has a removable dust cover, and even the USB cables on the controllers have a Sega stamp on them, just like the original serial port cables on the original controllers had. Sega even created a non-functioning tower of power to dress up your Genesis Mini and make it look like a decked out Genesis 32X Sega CD Sonic & Knuckles powerhouse. I'm very impressed with the Genesis Mini, and I'm definitely recommending picking one up if you were a Genesis fan back in the day. And even if you weren't, you'll probably still enjoy it. I'll leave a link down below where you can pick up your own from Amazon Canada. Unfortunately, I don't have any access to Amazon affiliate links anywhere outside of Canada, but if you're Canadian and you want to pick one of these up anyway, please consider using the Amazon affiliate link and help support the channel. I would really appreciate it. So that's it. Aside from a few little caveats, I think the Sega Genesis Mini is honestly the greatest miniature console yet. And if there are more to come, I hope that the companies can do a lot to beat this, because this is setting the bar really high in my opinion. And that's it. So thanks for tuning into Tech Progress. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Please consider subscribing for more great tech videos in the future. And I'll catch you in the next video. Take care.